हमारे कुलूब को मुनव्वर फरमाए। नाराए तकबीर, नाराए रिसालत, नाराए रिसालत, उलमाए अहले सुन्नत।
الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه طيبين طاهرين مع بعض. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ألا إن أولياء الله لا خوف عليهم ولا هم يحزنون الذين آمنوا وكانوا يتقون. صدق الله العظيم. مولانا Shaykh Miraj Ahmed, Pir-e-Tariqat, Khalid Sayyed, Moulana Hayat Sayyid, beloved Ahlul, respected elders, brothers and sisters in Islam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. There are two famous hadiths that we need to keep in mind whenever we gather together like this to remember the awliya Allah. One of them tells us about the path that they take to reach that maqam that they all occupy. And another one tells us what they do with all of those favors that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants them once they reach that state. The first of them is perhaps the most famous. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam tells us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself says, it's a hadith Qudsi, Allah says, my servant approaches me with nothing more beloved to me than what I have made fard upon him. There's nothing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves more from any of the Muslims than that they fulfill what He has commanded us to fulfill. But what distinguishes the awliya Allah from the rest of us is they don't stop there. The hadith continues, He says subhanahu wa ta'ala, and my slave keeps drawing nearer to me with voluntary ibadah, with nafli ibadah, until I love him. This is the path of the awliya Allah. To obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but their love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't allow them to stop there. They supplement what is fard with what is nafli. They're in a state of constant worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when they reach this state, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives them something. The hadith continues, and when I love him, because of this ibadah, I become the ears with which he hears, the eyes with which he sees, the hand with which he grasps, and the foot with which he walks. And if he asks of me, I will surely give to him. And if he takes refuge in me, I surely will protect him. This hadith tells us two things. That the path of the awliya Allah is the Sharia and it is the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And when they follow this path, they reach a place where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responds to them with these gifts. What does this ultimately mean? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answers the dua of the awliya Allah. If he asks of me, I will give to him. That's what this hadith teaches us. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answers the dua of the awliya Allah. It's not the case for every Muslim that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will respond in that way to our dua. Many of us know this. There's some weakness in our hearts, some weakness in even the adab of our reciting dua, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not respond to us in the way that He responds to the awliya Allah. But the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that He places in the hearts of the awliya Allah love and compassion for us. So that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives them this privilege, if He asks of me, I surely will give to him, they do not hold on to that dua for themselves, but they offer it to us. We learn this from the second hadith that describes for us who the awliya Allah are, narrated by Imam Abu Nu'aym in Hilyatul-Awliya, from Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu ta'ala. We won't recite the entire dua, it's rather long, but in it Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam tells us that at all times there are 356 awliya Allah on earth. There are more than this, but these 356 play a particular function. And they're divided up into different groups representing a hierarchy. There's a group of 300, group of 40, group of 7, of 5, 3, and then finally 1. That one wali at the top representing the highest maqam of the awliyaullah. The maqam of the one whom we're gathering here this weekend to remember, the one who is called the Qutb, or the Ghaus. But the hadith concludes with Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam telling us what these awliyaullah do. He says sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, it's because of them that creatures are given life and death. It's because of them that the rain falls. It's because of them that the vegetation grows. And it's because of them that difficulties are removed from our path. This might sound a little strange to some of you. And if it does, there's no harm in that. In fact, it's from Iman to have a question about this statement from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. How is it that the awliyaullah give life and death? This is something that as Muslims, as people of Tawheed, we say this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does. So there's no harm in having that question if any of you have that question in your heart. If you don't, but you know people who do, don't be hard on them either. Because the Taba'een had the same question. When Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu anhu narrated this hadith, people asked him about it. They said, how is it possible, referencing that one wali at the top of this hierarchy who we call the Ghaus, they asked him, how is it possible that this person gives life and death? How is it that this person causes the rain to fall? So there's no harm in asking this question. And they asked the right person. Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu anhu is one of the few Sahaba whom Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam commanded the other Sahaba to take knowledge from. This is the basis of the madhab of Imam Azzam Abu Hanifa, the ilm of Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu anhu. So he narrated this hadith, and the people had a question for him, and they knew that he was a man of knowledge, he would give them the correct answer. What did he say? He said, this is possible because when this wali makes dua that tyrants be put to their knees, they are destroyed. When this wali makes dua that creation expands, more creatures are born. This is how he gives life and death. He doesn't give life and death, rather he makes dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala do this for us. When we're suffering from a drought and the rain needs to fall, he makes dua for the rain to fall and the rain falls. When the harvest time comes after the rain falls, he makes dua that the harvest come and the vegetation grow and it grows. Whenever we encounter any difficulties, however trivial or great they might be, that's what he makes dua for us, and those difficulties are removed from our path. This is what's happening when Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam describes the function of the awliyaullah as those who give life and death and cause the rain to fall and so on and so forth. So these two hadiths together tell us that the awliyaullah are of such a maqam that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responds to their dua in this way. But it also tells us something very important about them. That with that privilege, they don't reserve that dua for themselves, but they give it to us. We make dua for our sake. And we said that these 356 awliyaullah represent a hierarchy. And at the top of them sits one wali, whom Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam described as having a heart like the heart of the angel Israfil. That wali is the wali whom we refer to as the Ghaus. Often people will ask, where do you get this term from? How can you say that Sayyidina Ghaus-e-Azam Shaykh al-Jilani radiyallahu is the Ghaus? The term itself might have come later, but the station comes from this hadith. And since he is the Ghaus, he sits at the top of this hierarchy, he undoubtedly is the most generous from amongst the awliyaullah. So the dua that he offers is going to benefit us the most. And if we look at the path of Ghaus-e-Azam Shaykh al-Jilani, both what he himself practiced and what he asked of us, we see that generosity was foremost amongst the virtues that he himself possessed and that he encouraged us to take on. Generosity in a simple form and in a great form as well. Those of you who are familiar with the life of Ghaus-e-Azam Shaykh al-Jilani know that during his time in Baghdad, every night his father would open up the doors of the Khanqa there in Baghdad, calling anyone who was hungry, anyone who was lonely,